When I was 12, I learned that my father was an activist in China, that he dedicated his life towards the ideas and principles of human rights and democracy. Now, up until this point, I didn't really even know what an activist was. I certainly didn't know much about my father's life in China, that although my childhood was characterized as innocent, my father never got the chance to know that. I never gave much of a thought, how I felt hearing about the neighborhood boys and girls go hungry another night. How I must have felt to have seen his home have been ransacked time and time again for the sake of some cultural revolution. And how I must have felt to have once been backed against a wall and to have felt nothing but the sheer, cold grip of a gun against his neck. I'm lucky. I'm lucky that trigger never went off, and that my father is still living, breathing, and with me tonight. It was from that understanding that I knew I had to be appreciative for the freedom I was born with and the freedom my father could have possibly found just 1 year after tanks rolled down Tiananmen Square. So eventually, I felt like I had to do something. I didn't know what to do, how to do it, if I could possibly do anything, but I knew I had to at least give it a shot. So over the course of years, I would find myself just doing simple things. Reading an online article, maybe once a week. Asking my dad about how things were. And eventually, I would find myself to grow more passionate about what's going on in the world. And I would do things I never thought I'd see myself doing, like starting and, creating an online account on a petition website, like sending emails and setting up meetings with office members of US politicians, and to hear of the stories of some of the most brilliant and courageous men I'd ever heard about, some of my father's closest friends. 2 of them, political dissidents. One on the left is named Peng Ming, and the one on the right, Wang Binzang. Now, both of these men could have gone on to have better careers, a secure life, but they took a risk. Peng Ming was an environmentalist, an economist, who wanted to think of ideas of how to reform a system because he wanted a more sustainable future. He wanted one that was better for his children. And for that, he was sent to re-education camp. And after he got out, he knew that despite this, he still had to do something. Dr. Wang, he had gone to one of the most prestigious universities in China. And he could have easily found a job later on in the medical field, but as my dad tells me, that when he'd gone to Tibet, when he had seen the conditions that the Chinese government had left them under, for so many to have been left just starving on the streets, he couldn't just sit idly by. And so both men, despite how inconvenient it might have seemed, they dedicated their lives to the same thing, to pushing for a better cause. Tonight, they're sitting right behind prison bars. The reason why I want to introduce these 2 specific cases is that although they might seem extreme, I think that there's a way that all of us can find ways to relate to this, because I know not a single day goes on in which I would ever want to see my dad behind a set of prison bars. And I know not one of you here would ever want to see anyone you could possibly love have a life imprisonment for the sake of carrying a Bible, for the sake of trying to pursue an education outside of the classroom, for the sake of just trying to make a better future for your children by standing up for something, by voicing your opinion. And I think a lot of times that's the thing. It's hard for us to sometimes remember that they're human. Because what I've grown to understand and what I've grown to think about is that I see these men just as I saw my father, not as a revolutionary, not as a reformer, but simply a father, a brother, an uncle, a loved one. And it's when we can look with that kind of mindset that we're ready to do something. Because I believe that when we can look past messy numbers, statistics, and headlines that we might see, we take the first step to becoming great history makers. And sometimes it's just in the simplest of ways. Whether just writing and signing a petition, emailing the office of a US politician. When we take the advantages we've been given, we share our voice, we share our ideas, we're taking that first step. And what we have to remind ourselves is that we're not alone. Like I said, we're all human. We've all gone through tough times. And that way we can always relate to one another, even if we don't find ourselves in these same sticky situations. There's things that we can all do throughout it all. Because I believe that so long as there are issues, there must be activists. Otherwise, our hopes for change can't really become reality. And that when we can understand that every single right we've ever been given, every single freedom we've ever known, was given to us by a veteran, by an activist, decades, centuries ago, that we never met, but they chose to see us differently. That although I was a stranger in their eyes, who it could have been very well that I wasn't even born at the time, they chose to love me, a stranger, someone they never knew. And so with that, we carry an equal obligation. That since we've come to know the freedom that they fought so far for us, that we have to continue their work in whatever we do. So I take the first step tonight, and I become an activist. Who will you be?